Episode 6 of the Record Shepherdz. Welcome to another segment. Welcome to another gathering on this dreary Monday New York, situation.
Hello.
How's everybody doing?
Good, thanks, Timmy. How are you?
Very good indeed.
I'm good. Why don't you make the introduction, Jason?
Well, yeah, for those of you watching us on YouTube, you'll notice that there is a new face on the couch.
He's replacing us.
A handsome face at that.
Hello.
Probably could have replaced us if
Who's
we're
our
not
friend,
careful.
Jason?
So, big welcome to Rob Nassif. Rob, some of you will note that Rob is from the Australian band Gyroscope, formerly, and importantly, is also a manager in the music industry. Rob manages a couple of bands, most notably the Faim and Red Hook. So big welcome, Rob. Thanks for coming and sitting on the couch.
Ooh. Thank you.
We need a clapping
Thanks for the
machine.
invite.
Big clap,
Next
big
episode.
Great to be here.
Big claps.
Appreciate it, guys. Good to
Yeah.
be here. Thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
So
My pleasure.
like with these episodes, our goal is to obviously inform the independent musician, those coming up, trying to establish a career and trying to navigate what that looks like,
Yeah.
right? So we've talked about distributing your own music, collecting royalties from it, marketing it, building your team, and we thought that it would be really special for the audience if we had somebody who is an actual seasoned veteran manager and a musician in your own right.
Yeah, great.
With your extensive career. So again, thank you for being here, and love to talk to you and hear what you have to say throughout this.
Yeah, look, great to be here, guys, and you're doing a great thing because outside of that, I also own some rehearsal studios where young bands are rehearsing, and so when I'm in Perth and I'm back at the studios, I'm often talking to them about a lot of this stuff, and there's a real thirst for this knowledge to be out there. So you're doing it, and it's great that we can all bring our own backgrounds to this to try and help the next generation of musicians coming up, because when I was their age, I certainly needed it and was thirsty for it. So it's great.
Yeah, and shout out to the Hen House in Perth. We got Tom here in the studio off camera, but he's here today, the manager of the Hen House. So
He is.
there's a little
Hello,
plug for
Tommy.
you guys. So-
Hopefully he's next on the couch.
Yes.
soon.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, two back to back.
Yep.
But it's absolutely fantastic, and I think what we'd really love to dive into today is that's a pretty unique, I guess. It's certainly a valuable skill set to have been the artist and to have graduated into management now. So I think that's we're gonna get hopefully some really great insight on that. So let's start at the start. Gyroscope. You joined Gyroscope when you were 15 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, I was 15 years old, and the way it came about was I met Zoran, the other founding member, at a friend's grade 9 birthday party, and he was the cool muso guy and was looking to start a band, and he got wind that I had just bought a drum kit, and I couldn't actually play the drums, but I had a drum kit, and it worked out great because he was like, dude, don't worry about it. I can play drums. I'll teach you. Like, this is how bad this guy wanted to start a band.
Wow.
So I was like, fantastic, because the drums have been sitting there for 6 months, and I've tried to play, but I can't, and I've tried to teach myself, and I'm not very good. And he showed me how to play my first drum beats, and after the first rehearsal, he's like, great, let's start a band. I've got a great name, Gyroscope. And I was just like, wow, this guy's crazy. This guy really
That's
is
amazing.
so driven. This is awesome. And I was just like, great. His name was Zoran. Still is Zoran. And honestly, I just jumped on board, and we started. I think by the second rehearsal, we wrote our first ever song, and then started learning covers. And maybe 3 months after that, we played our first gig, which was a friend's party, and we were away. And so we were 15 years old, but that's how Gyroscope started.
Who are you covering initially? What were your initial inspirations?
The first song I ever learnt to play, and I didn't play it with, half as much swagger as Brad Wilk, was Bulls on Parade by Rage
Okay.
Against the Machine.
Nice.
Mainly because he was trying to explain to me that when you hit the cymbal, you have to use your kick drum. So
Yeah.
it was like, dun, 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 dun. He was teaching me that. So it was stuff like that, and a lot of Smashing Pumpkins. So a lot of Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana, which was of the era, which was 97. when we
Totally.
started.
Yeah.
Totally.
I always say that, especially for people learning their instrument, I think there's two ways, right? There's like, you are learning the technicality,
Yes.
you're learning your rudiments, your chops. But at the end of the day, I feel like the best way to learn how to play music is to play music,
Oh,
you
I
know?
love it.
And I think being in a band definitely propels that sort of learning process and listening to
time.
music.
Yeah, 100%.
great.
Especially whenever you've got like a gig on the immediate horizon and you have to learn those
Yeah,
songs, right? And it's like, but
You
if
have no
you're,
choice.
but if you playing anything that you love and you're passionate about and you actually want to learn to play, that's like a big accelerator, I think.
Yeah, and we started, I think, like the first couple of shows that we were playing 1 or 2 original songs and all covers, and it was just friends' parties. It wasn't even really like proper venues, but within that first year, we had got a full set of original songs, and then we started gigging around Perth. In '98 we were all in high school still, so we had to have like a band member's mother or father come to the shows, so our parents would rotate. And so, it was very grassroots. And then 99 was our first year out of high school,
Right.
the 4 of us. And that year we played about 110 shows around Perth. So we
Wow.
we're playing like twice a week, anything and everything, every kind of venue, every show, every genre, anything.
That's pretty unique, I feel like, for a band right out of high school being that consistent.
Yeah.
You know, what was there a switch where you were like, okay, we're going to take this seriously and, do all of these shows, or it just sort of happened organically?
Because I would say we probably played like 20 shows in grade 12 across at friends' parties, and we wanted to do more, but we were all doing our final like year of exams, and like parents were getting worried because we were trying to rehearse twice a week as well.
Yeah.
We were rehearsing twice a week in grade 12, and that continued on for the first couple of years out of high school as well. But it was just a hunger. We just felt like we noticed how much better we got every time we played live.
Wow.
And a lot of people had the thought, well, you shouldn't play too often because your friends won't come see you. But our friends stopped coming to see us after like 10 shows. So it made no difference.
I know that feeling. I
like
definitely know
Perth's
that
a
feeling.
small place. Everyone's got a couple of mates. So we just played. We overplayed. And eventually people would be like, you guys played too much. But we really didn't care because it was fun. We were loving it. So
Yeah. I'm sure that honed your craft as well, like the stage craft. And
I think it did, because we did like 110 shows in 99. I think we did 105 in 2000. 2001, we took 6 months off because I studied overseas, but then we still squeezed in like another 50 in the second half of that year. And then like 2002, we did our first interstate tour, probably did another 70 or 80. And then we were signed in 2003.
2003. So how many years then were you from forming the band to actually getting signed?
6 years.
6 years.
Wow.
Okay. That's
a lot of shows too, huh?
Yeah. I think
a lot of shows, yeah.
for the listeners, that is, I guess a great lesson or example of, perseverance and how it can pay off,
Yeah.
At what stage on that 6-year journey were you guys like, no, like we're doing this, like we have an aim to get, like, was it ever an aim to get signed, or was it just because for the love of it and we'll see what happens?
It was always for the love of it to see what happens, but we were very driven. Like we wanted to emulate our favorite bands, like, Smashing Pumpkins was signed to Hut Records, Nirvana was signed to Geffen, Guns N' Roses was on Geffen. These are all like the artists we idolized, and they were all on major labels. So we had that drive to do that, but we also knew, coming from Perth, Western Australia, that could be challenging. But we just kept doing it. And fortunately, a couple of other West Australian bands before us had got signed. So there were people looking around. I think, if I think back to that time, we did have a 6-month break. And I think it was good that we did that, because it came off the back of a couple of years of hard touring where the band hadn't really progressed. Like by the time we had that break, we were progressing, but very slowly. We had that 6-month break. Everyone was listening to new music. It also coincided with when Napster became really popular. And so all of a sudden we were downloading songs through Napster of all these like American artists that we had never heard of. Because going back to that era of like 2001, you would have to order a CD, get it sent. Yeah. So then all of a sudden I was studying in Canada, and a lot of other college students were showing me like these cool emo bands, and I was then sending that to the guys in Gyroscope. And then by the time I came back and we wrote that next generation of songs, the songs had stepped up big time. We
Next level.
thought like they were really, really cool.
And you were the drummer, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like, participating in the songwriting from like a drummer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the guys in Gyroscope have always been amazing, and I think it's because we all learned to play our instruments sort of and came up together. We split everything equally, no matter who writes a song, no matter what contribution. Every single Gyroscope song, everything was 25% each. We also knew that like that's how U2 did it, Coldplay, Radiohead. And so we wanted to be that sort of band. And I think I could see multiple ways whether that's a good or a bad thing, but for us it was a really good thing because it forced me, the drummer, where I didn't come up with any melodies or lyrics. I didn't do any of that, but it encouraged me to find my place within the band. And for me, that was like structure, understanding structure, trying to understand how various structures affect the flow of a song. And then even just being more involved in other elements of the band. So merchandise, networking, meeting people, you know, that came really easy to me, talking to people and meeting people, whereas the other three guys in the band, it didn't. So we all kind of found our strengths and it was great. And because we were all getting 25%, it encouraged us to be a four-legged table.
So you guys were managing yourselves, right? Or
At that point, for the first couple of years we were, and then we picked up a manager. Actually, probably like 2000, we picked up a manager, and he was like at our level. You know, he just loved the band and he wanted to learn to be a manager, and he was maybe 2 or 3 years older than us, so we agreed to that. And he was really good for us for a couple of years and helped us get signed, and actually did manage the band for, I would say, like 6.5 years, was very invested. And unfortunately, you know, it got to a point, I mean, geez, you know, where I basically said, I'm going to quit the band if we don't fire the manager, which it sounds very harsh.
What a
now.
diva.
But that's important.
Sometimes it's necessary to just...
I just felt like, you know, and I just felt like he was a great guy and still is a great guy. But just we had worked really hard to get to this point. We were like on the cusp of getting dropped from the label. The first album had done okay. The label was sort of happy. The second album didn't really do what we had hoped. We weren't getting the festivals, the shows and the looks that we really wanted. So...
There was not a lot of contribution, I guess, from your perspective.
I just felt like he hadn't grown in the same way we had. And so it was like a real moment for the band. You know, we'd done 2 albums and, you know, I was also, at that point, I was probably like 26, 27. And I just felt like it's either going to happen soon, like as in the next album, or I probably need to start thinking about what I want to do with my future. Because by that stage, I still wasn't earning a salary from music.
Right.
I had just come off like a couple of years on Social Security, and it was fine in my 20s. But, you know, once you get to like 26, 27, you're getting closer to 30, you're thinking about these things. So, yeah, I mean, not to jump around too much, but yeah, we fired the manager after 6.5 years.
That's very interesting because, I mean, we're coming from the topic of management today, you know, and you had the first experience from the other end as an artist working with a manager and like
I know, and I think like, gosh, if I got fired, I've been managing the Faim now for 6 years, and if I got fired now, I've been thinking about that, like how we fired that manager, Matt, and I would be devastated, and he was devastated.
So what did you guys look for in finding that second manager? Was it somebody a bit more connected or
just more experienced? Someone that had done it, someone that had taken a band from like nothing to something. That's what it was all about. We just wanted someone experienced. And really the next thing we did was we reached out, we just drew a list of the top 10 managers in Australia that we thought. Number 1 on that list was a woman named Ray Harvey, because she managed a band called The Living End that we all loved. Number 2 was a guy named John Watson, who had done Silverchair, Wolf Mother, Missy Higgins. We created the list. We reached out to all of them. All of them said they'll meet us, because by that stage, Gyroscope had a pretty good profile.
Of course.
We sat down with all of them. 1 or 2 of them just met with us to give us advice. Like John Watson was like, I got my hands full. I can't take on, but I'll meet you. And he gave us lots of great advice. And then Zoran and I flew to the East Coast. We met with, 5 of those managers in Melbourne, 5 of them in Sydney. And the very last meeting was with Ray Harvey, who was our number 1 pick. And we had met Ray before because Gyroscope had supported the Living End around Australia, and everyone was terrified of Ray because she's a very strong woman and she speaks her mind and absolutely no bullshit at all. But I'd always had a real soft spot with Ray because we were also terrified to meet her the first time in 2003 when we were supporting the Living End, that when I did meet her, I just gave her a big hug. And she was like so taken aback by it. Yeah. She was so taken aback by it. And then she insisted on paying for a Gyroscope shirt. And I said, Ray, you gave us this tour. You're getting one for free. And so I had a little bit of a relationship and we got on great. Long story short, she took us on and it was the greatest decision we ever made it as a band.
So that's definitely interesting. We've talked a little bit about on this pod about artists treating their career and their music as a business.
Yep.
And I guess, or like even like a sports team or whatever, if your coach is not delivering the results or your CEO is not delivering the results, it's like, it doesn't matter how good a person that individual may be, ultimately it's a business. And you have to be somewhat business minded and potentially ruthless in those situations. So it's interesting to hear that story and how it actually paid dividends for you guys.
Yeah, and that's a great point because you do have to. It's so the lines get blurred so easily because you become friends, and like we were all friends with Matt, the previous manager, and one guy in the band in particular was very good friends with him. And so that's what makes it so hard. But you also have to remember as a musician, you have a finite amount of time to really have a go.
Yeah.
And it depends what you're trying to do, but we were signed by that point for a 3-album deal. We weren't sure if we were even going to get to do the 3rd album because the 2nd was a little disappointing. And you've got to say like, and that's why I said to the guys, for me, it's now or never. Now, if you want to keep Matt, that's fine, but then I'm going to go and I'll pursue my next thing. If we're willing to go to another manager, because I was confident we could find one, I was confident we'd get one, then it was a case of let's go now. And, the 3rd album ended up being set up properly. Ray did an amazing job. We got all the right tours and it ended up debuting at #1 on the charts.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Changed the course of my life, really.
Well, speaking of the charts, what are some of the tools that are essential for a band in Australia trying to make it, for lack of a better term? Like, is it significant plays on radio there? Is it, you have to be linked in with the right management, the right venues? What are the key ingredients for that?
Yeah, well, Australia has the greatest thing ever, and that's Triple J. It's a radio station that is across the whole entire nation. It's owned by the Australian government and it's got a youth focus. So, the Australian government says we want this station, to focus on, I think it's like, 16 to 24-year-old age group. And Triple J plays everything. They play rock, hip hop, metal. It's government funded. There's no advertising on there. So there's like a lot of radio that it plays. And it's absolutely brilliant. And they have programs where they try to get, it's a program called Unearthed where they discover new talent. So any band can upload their music to Unearthed and it's great. You can get discovered and they'll start playing your music.
Amazing.
So getting Triple J can be huge. And I've been on the receiving end for Gyroscope. We got a lot of Triple J airplay. I think with the 4 albums we released, the 3 singles off each album got Triple J high rotation.
Amazing.
So we built our career off it because you get played on it in every part of Australia. So it allows you over the time to be able to go on tour all over Australia. So that's really important. And Red Hook, one of the bands I manage, gets some really healthy radio play on Triple J, which has helped them push on. And then the Faim, the other band I manage, has never been played once. So I've seen both sides of the coin with Triple J.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's just I guess like that's the nut to crack in Australia, really.
It is,
isn't it?
Triple J, it's big.
But so let's now is a sort of good time. That's interesting to hear your experience as an artist and that relationship with managers and from that side of the coin. Now you, as we've said, are now on the other side of the coin, so the boot's on the other foot.
Yes, it is.
And so let's dive a little bit into that. At what point did you know you wanted to become a manager, or did it kind of just happen? You knew?
No, I did. I always wanted to be a manager, like very early on, because I was the business guy in Gyroscope, would like handle more of that stuff. Again, I think because I wasn't contributing as much in the songwriting department, I was like, I've got to, this incredible talent, Daniel Sanders, he's bringing these like amazing songs. Zoran was writing these incredible songs. I was like, I need to do something. So I was always into the business side, and then actually having Ray Harvey as Gyroscope's manager was just so illuminating, because I learned so much from her and saw the way she interacted with people, and I saw how respected she was, and just how important it is to have a network and to be able to rely on that network, so that when you need that favor, so like we needed, at that point in time, we needed to get on the Big Day Out, which was the biggest tour in Australia. Yeah. And she called that favor from that person at the Big Day Out and got us on there. And, we did the Big Day Out tour at this like perfect slot on like the third stage at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And we're playing in front of like, 20,000 people.
Amazing.
At each show around Australia. And then we dropped, the first single was really popular at the time, and then we dropped the second single, which ended up doing really well, and then by the time we dropped the album, it goes to number one. And these are all the things, like, a great manager is able to get you on those things.
So a lot of that just being around that and witnessing it, that I guess you're learning by osmosis. You're actually
big time. Ray was incredible. So details oriented, like, and really made sure things were planned and organized. And if there was a mistake, she took ownership of it, and she'd be the first to put her hand up and say, "Yep, that's my bad. I'm really sorry. I'll do better next time." She never shifted the blame, and I tried to do that too, because I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but I learnt a lot, and I feel like so much of the way I manage bands, the two bands that I manage, is really from Ray, because she ended up managing Gyroscope for 10 years. She was amazing.
So, okay, so you knew you wanted to get into management, and like, I guess the first band that you signed up to manage is the Faim.
Yes.
Okay. Shout out to the Faim. Go and check out their new singles. There'll be an album coming soon.
July 8th. Talk.
There you go.
Talk.
So, how did you discover the Faim, or I guess what were you looking for before you had actually made that first endeavor into management? Like, for a lot of our listeners, I guess they'll be looking, there's a lot of listeners probably at that stage where they're wondering, like, Jesus, do I need a manager? Maybe I do, etc. And, how do I go about getting one or attracting one? Because at the end of the day, for a manager to invest in an artist, especially at a very early stage of the career, when you discovered the Faim, it's a commitment, and
big commitment.
Possibly, you're going to invest a lot of time for little to no payday, with hopefully the promise that it's going to come good in the end. So tell us a little bit about the Faim and your discovery and that sort of decision-making process.
Yeah, so I discovered the Faim at the rehearsal studios that I own. We have like 17 rooms at a couple of warehouses in Perth, and I always thought I would discover a band at the studio, because it was like we had the majority of Perth bands were rehearsing with us. I was always listening to bands, and I had discovered a band there that I loved called Tired Lion, and they had asked me to manage them, and I had and I'd and I actually said no. And then it was like a year later, Tired Lion ended up doing really well. They got a lot of Triple J airplay, and I thought, well, you know what? My instincts were good. I knew there was something special in this band, and I passed on it, and I really regretted it. So then my eyes were a lot more open trying to find that next band, and I was looking. Nothing had really come my way. And then one day it was just like a Friday night at the studio. The way it works is, because we've got the two warehouses, we write all the bands up on a chalkboard, and we'd written the band, the Faim up. I'd never heard of them, never seen them. In my head, I imagined they were a lot older. And then when I heard Josh singing a Faim song at the door, I was like, wow, this guy's got a great voice. Wow, what a voice. Jeez. And in my head, because his voice was so like rich and deep, I was thinking like this must be like, mid-20s. And then they finished the song. I knocked on the door, opened the door, and I'm like, wow, you guys are young. They're all like 17, 18. I'm like, fellas, that was great. Wow, cool song. Can can you play me another one? And they're like, yeah, well, we'd love to. We've been trying to rehearse here to meet you. Because, you know, you're the guy from Gyroscope and we want to meet you. And like, you signed a record deal and we want to sign a record deal. And they were really, they were really lovely. They were very endearing and just like, you know, had like so many questions about like how you signed to a label and this and that. And so, yeah, they played me a couple of songs. It was good. It wasn't great, but I really liked them. I said, okay, fellas, here's my number. Let's go get a coffee this week. And then like, you know, closed the door. And then like I got a message 30 seconds later and it was like, hey, Rob, it's the guys from the Faim. We'd love to go get a coffee this week. You know, so they were so
embarrassing them here.
Yeah. So they were so keen. And yeah, that was 2015. And they were playing their first ever show for like a month later. And so they were at the studio each week, and then I went to their first ever show. It was an absolute disaster, and I thought, you know what? I do want to manage a band, but this isn't the band because they just need so much work, you know, so much. And I said to them, I said, look, you're lovely guys. I think you got all this talent. You just got to write better songs. Keep writing songs. Send me the demos. I'll give you some feedback. And they did that for a year. They kept sending the demos. And I kept giving them feedback on the songs. Why don't you try this, change that? And then after a year of doing that, they sent a batch of like 3-4 songs, and they were really good. And I was sitting down with them, and they're like, come on, Rob. Come on, man. Just manage us. You like us. We like you. Come on. But I was kind of scared. I was scared to make that commitment because I know how much.
It's a big commitment, yeah.
It's such a big commitment. Yeah. And because I know how much work it takes. So it was a full year after I met them. It was like July 2016 when I said, okay, boys, let's do it. I started managing them. And then it was October 2017 that they signed to BMG.
Yes.
So, you know, it was a year of solid work with the band as their manager after a whole year of just helping them that we eventually got signed to BMG LA office, which is how our orbits all connected. From me eventually moving to New York and ending up in the New York office working at BMG.
Tom, I have a question. So to break it down a little bit, basically the process for you to sign this band, first you got interested because of their music, right? You heard them and you heard what they were doing and you thought it was good.
Yes.
But then you saw the band live and it wasn't quite there yet,
so
right?
Green.
So you saw that they still needed development and you helped them on that development.
Yes.
At least by giving them advice and like
exactly
all that stuff, but it was not really a management commitment yet.
No management commitment because I just thought, oh God, this really requires so much work because they like the show there were so many mistakes. It wasn't that tight. The songs were okay, but they were very generic. It was like very pop punk, like extremely pop punk, which I grew up loving pop punk, but it was emulating the bands that they had.
Yeah, it needed to be a next
generation of that. And so it was just about explaining a little bit of that stuff and saying, hey, why don't you try this, do this, like experiment more. And then actually when I finally thought about doing it, I like any major decision I make, I always just like consult my wife, Brianne, and it was like, she was my girlfriend at the time. They were playing at a competition, this like band competition in Perth called Gozzy Rock. And so we drove out to this suburb called Gosnells where they have the Gozzy Rock Festival. And we saw them play, and I hadn't seen them play since that first show. And they'd played about 20, 30 shows by now. And then they played the show, and it was awesome. They were so good. They'd improved so much. I was like, okay, well, this is a band that's been doing their homework.
So on that, this might be good for our listeners to know. What are some things a band needs to have locked together before they seek out management? Do you think there's a time where it's too early? Like what are, what are
I do. I think bands seek out management way too early. And I think you should hold off management as much as you can to a certain degree because it encourages you to learn. Because no one's going to care about your band, including the manager, as much as you. You know, like if your manager cares more than you, there's a real big problem. The band should learn how to do this stuff. They should learn how to be self-sufficient. They should be, I like when I see it, it's actually a turn on for a manager to see a band that's got like 30,000 followers by themselves. Which is what the Faim had. They had 30,000 followers before I came along on Instagram. And I was like, how the hell did you do that? That's more than like most big bands in Perth.
That is a lot for, you know,
especially back in like 2015.
Yeah, for an unsigned band with just starting out. And I mean that's actually interesting to the point where how did they do that?
Well, Jason, I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you. back then, the news feed on Instagram was just chronological. And so, you know, it didn't get curated. Like if you followed someone and they put up a post, that would be the next thing you saw.
Got you.
You know, it wasn't just content.
It wasn't algorithmic.
It wasn't algorithmic.
Like it is. Yeah, right.
So they would post a lot of content and they would tailor all their content to finding fans that would be similar to the music that they were writing. So they would target like All Time Low, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco. They would do covers of all of those songs. And then they would go on to, so they would do let's say a All Time Low cover.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would go on the All Time Low Instagram page and see all the people that are writing comments to an All Time Low post. And they'd say, hey, we're a band from Perth called The Faim. We've just covered All Time Low, Dear Maria. Why don't you come to our page and check it out? They would literally do that because there wasn't a cap on how many comments.
That's really clever.
There wasn't a cap on how many comments you could do at that time.
Yeah.
So what they would do is they would literally work. They would each pick a different post, which would have like hundreds of comments, and then all four guys would invite 100 people. So they'd invite 400 young music lovers that would then see the All Time Low cover, and then they would follow the band, and that's how they did it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Very
but that's
clever.
hustle, isn't it?
Very
yeah,
clever.
that's like
Yes.
I mean, two things that we just touched on there is you know, on this podcast we're sort of repeatedly now saying that like it is up to the artist to, you know, do these things themselves, to learn how to market initially. You know, like it's great if you can't do it yourself and you're able to form like a network of people who are going to help each other. That's the next best thing. And of course do that, but actually being able to do a lot of this stuff yourself, or if you're in a band within the band, I think is so important for developing artists these days. And
it's huge. And like I say, it's something that as a manager, when you see that, you're like, this is awesome.
Because that's a form of creativity in itself,
time.
you know, and back to, you know, what we were talking about at the very start, just having like a sheer willpower and perseverance to succeed, you know, and getting creative with that, and just showing like that they're willing to do whatever it takes, you know, like to get creative and get the name out there. So
yeah, I also think it would be nice to show a little love to Red Hook too, which is the other band that you have signed. So
definitely.
I want to, maybe you could talk a bit about how that came to be, and if, you know, your experience with the Faim sort of influenced, you know, how you went to sign other bands and like what you were looking for.
So I guess the other interesting thing for me, maybe compared to other managers, I only manage 2 bands, and that's because I am really involved when I manage bands, and it's time consuming, and it's just me. I don't like I have a team around me, obviously bookkeepers, accountants. We have a great record label in BMGs. We have product manager and marketing. But ultimately, it's just me, and I want to be able to give 100% to both bands. So I started managing Red Hook at the start of 2019, and I came across them through a promoter in the UK who I'd become friends with, Sean Ryman. Shout out to Rymanator. He said to me, "Hey, Robbie, have you heard this band from Sydney? They're amazing, and I don't think they've got a manager." And I was like, "Great, I'll check it out." And it was great. They had a song called Paralyzed that just blew me away. I was like, wow, this song is just incredible. Whoa. And it was unreleased. I was like, this could be a big song. Like, this could be a big song. Triple J could absolutely snap this up. So he introduced me. I got on a call with them. They were lovely. I spoke to Emmy and Craig, the main 2 songwriters of the band. I was coming back to Australia, and they were about to play at a festival. There was a bit of hype building around Red Hook, and I said, okay, I'm flying back on like the Thursday. I'll then fly straight to Sydney on the Friday. I got to Sydney Friday night, and then on the Saturday I went to see them play at the festival. And honestly, it wasn't great either. Like a bit of bad luck with the first shows. They'd never played such a big show. They were opening this festival, and it was okay. You know, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. But then I hung out with them and I met them, and I just thought, oh geez, I really liked them. I really liked Emmy because she was so driven. Like, she was so driven. She was like driven like I felt like I was driven at her age. You know, like I still see a lot of myself in her, in the way she's so hungry, and she's always like following up on like emails and checking this and thinking about, hey Rob, you know, I saw I Prevail. is doing a Japan tour, and usually once they go to Japan, then they come into Perth, and it's great because I can't be tapped into everything in their world. I'm like, brilliant. Of course they're coming to Australia. Bands always do that. So then I'm like the first person emailing iPrevail's manager. Then I'm working out who the promoter is. Then I'm working out who the Australian agent from overseas is. And then I'm hitting all of them up to try and get them on the iPrevail tour. And so we really work as a team. So basically, initially with Red Hook, loved the music, thought they had one absolutely killer song. And then when I was thinking about managing them, I gave them a challenge and I said, okay, guys, write me 1 minute of music, but I want it to be the heaviest thing you've ever written. And then write me 1 minute of music, which is the lightest thing you've ever written. And we just want like a verse, a chorus, and a riff. Or it could be a riff, a verse, and a chorus, or just 3 sections, however you want to put it together. And they sent the light song idea through. It was crap, which was fine. They sent the heavy song idea through. It was brilliant. It was unbelievable. And that became what was the song that got released after Paralyzed, called Only Bones.
Yeah.
So the first song they released, Paralyzed, got Triple J, high rotation, did well. Then the second song was Only Bones, also got Triple J, high rotation, did well, and we're off to the races. So
I've noticed obviously the Faim being signed and Red Hook currently being an unsigned band. I suspect there's a lot of like different sort of tactics or ways that they're going about things. I noticed that Red Hook so far to date, it's been one track at a time. They don't currently have an album.
No.
What's the thinking behind that? Just for a lot of the listeners who maybe think, you have to have an album, you have to build to an album. What are your thoughts on that?
It's just a reflection of where DSPs and streaming is these days, that you, I think, are so much better off releasing one song at a time, because you do get the opportunity to target playlisting over and over and over again. So obviously when you release a song, and we'll use Spotify as an example, but it's the same for all the digital service providers, is that song, even if a couple of things happen. It gets serviced to all the people that follow that band already on the Discover Weekly. So, it'll automatically get serviced to you if you listen to the band a lot. It gets added to a lot of algorithmic playlists on Spotify, so that you'll automatically get them. And then, of course, you're in the running for New Music Friday playlists for around the world, and then the genre playlists. So, like for Red Hook, we're really fortunate in they straddle a whole bunch of genres. So, like their last song, Low Budget Horror, got on like the all-new rock playlist, the all-new metal playlist, and the all-new punk playlist. And each one of those playlists has like 200,000 to 400,000 followers. So we got featured on all of those. You generate streams. It pushes your monthly listeners up. And it's just a great way to go. I mean, the caveat there is you can't just release a song and it should be good. You should feel like this is a step where like we're releasing something that's great.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like, especially as a manager, a band's ability to write a song is super important to you.
It is to me, because I, like most people in the music industry, but I've seen, the reality is a great song does the majority of the hard work. A manager doing all the hard work to try and make a song great doesn't really work. It helps a little bit, but when you have a truly great song, and I've only been involved in a handful of truly great songs, and with my 2 acts, I think the Faim has had one truly great song, and I think Red Hook has had one truly great song. The Faim actually maybe 2, but and you've got to, and when you really believe that this is like a really special song, you've got to, like, as a manager, pull out all the stops, because it's your job to convince everyone to see what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And so I love that, because when I truly believe something's just unbelievable, I will just do whatever I can to convince people and show people, and I think that's what a manager does well. But if they don't have that, I can't pretend, which is why I feel sorry sometimes for like Faim and Red Hook, because I can be quite hard on, and I just try to also be really honest, because I feel like as a manager, it's one of the few positions within and around a band where you will get complete honesty.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a good segue into talking about, like, exactly what are your roles as a manager on the day-to-day. You talked about being an advocate for your artists and like being honest with them. What what are some other things that you are doing as a manager, and what do the bands expect from you?
They're really different actually between the two bands, and I think it's because of the ages of the two bands. So like with who was it? The Faim were very young when they started, like they were like 17, 18. So, you know, part of working with those guys is they'd never toured. They'd never played a show outside of Perth. They're also young. Like half of them had never been on an aeroplane. So with the Faim, I've had to do everything, you know, even like the first international tour, they're all too young to get on the driving van. So I drove the van, you know, for them, and tour managed it. And so with a band like the Faim, it's literally everything. So all the logistics of the tour, it's, you know, a big part of with the Faim is really liaising with our partners. So liaising with BMG. Faim is fortunate to have a really strong audience in France and then Germany, but then also UK, Australia. We're building a lot slower in the US, but we're signed out of the US, so I deal a lot with the US team. So it's liaising with everyone. And then I really feel like a huge part of the role of a manager, it's to find opportunity. Like I want to be a manager that's proactive rather than like waiting for something to come our way. So like, you know, perfect example is the Faim had a whole bunch of festivals this summer in Europe where they are playing like the biggest festival in Belgium. They're doing Rock Hammering, Rock in the Park in Germany. They're doing these 3 big festivals in France, Download Festival in the UK. So I was just looking at those lineups to see what bands are similar to the Faim that are obviously touring at the same time. Imagine Dragons kept popping up. So it was like, okay, great. Well, who's Imagine Dragons manager? Finding out who that is, then trying to see if there's someone that knows Imagine Dragons manager that can introduce me. I finally found that someone. I got an introduction, sent them the songs, pitched them. They listened to it. We were in the running for the support for their headline shows around Europe. Now, we didn't get it, but that's the hustle of a manager. Right. So it's trying to find opportunity. So with Faim, it's all encompassing. And it's also hard in the sense that we work across so many time zones. So like I'm based in New York. Most of the action is France, Germany, and UK, which is all 5 and 6 hours in front of us. Then a bunch of actions also happening in Australia, which is 12 and 15 hours. And then LA is, you know, 3 hours behind us, and that's where our team is. So in the one time zone that I actually live in, I don't deal with almost anyone. Everyone is in a different time zone. Yeah. So it's a lot of big days where you're doing emailing in the morning and at night and then work throughout the day. Wow. Red Hook's a different proposition. They're really self-sufficient. And I don't work like that. They are very good about organizing a lot of their own logistics. And I love them. I love them for it because it frees me up to just worry about the bigger picture things with Red Hook. Like an example there is, you know, I desperately wanted to get them on Rock Hammering, Rock in the Park. It's the perfect festival for them. We already had the Faim on that big festival, so we had an in there. And they had already finished the lineup, but I just spoke to the promoters, spoke to our agent to say, like, look, obviously with COVID around and everything that's happening, there's a chance bands might cancel. Even some bands aren't comfortable flying to Europe at the moment, not just for COVID, but the situation in Ukraine. Right. And so, yeah, we pitched ourselves a while ago, just said, if anyone pulls out, we will do it. We don't care what we get paid. We don't care where we play. And that's what happened. Someone pulled out at the last minute and we got it. So fantastic. Yeah, very different roles between the Faim and Red Hook, but Red Hook are a good sort of like 5 years older than the Faim crew. So, you know, they've got a bit more experience themselves. So it helps.
Got you. So would you say that today's music industry affects the way a song is structured, specifically when servicing it to like radio or to the DSPs? Like, you know, is the way the listener listens to music affect, you know, how you advise Red Hook and the Faim to write a song?
I mean, I think it does. I think, you know, just the way that streaming works, right? So, you know, when a song, Spotify just wants you to keep using Spotify. So if you commit to pulling out your phone, clicking on Spotify and clicking on a playlist or a song, they just want to keep you there. That's the ultimate metric for them, is how much time you spend listening to Spotify. And so just in line with that, a couple of things happen every time you listen to a song. Spotify looks to see, do you share that song with someone? Because if you share a song with someone, it's really the ultimate compliment, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So that really works in that song's favor. Do you listen all the way through the song? Do you add the song to your playlist? Mm-hmm. If you're doing all of these things, these are great indicators that this song is connecting. And Spotify is awesome about seeing that, identifying it, and then pushing it. Because then they will continue to push that song to the algorithmic playlist. And Red Hook has a song that this is happening to right now. So Red Hook released a song called Bad Decisions 18 months ago, and it just had its biggest streaming day yesterday. Like, wow,
that's crazy. 18 months later.
18 months later. Yesterday was its biggest day.
And what is it? Why 18 months later that has happened? Is it just it's organically people have had time to stumble across it, enjoy it, listen to it again, share it, save it to playlists?
Yep. So yes, that's been happening. People are saving it to their own playlist a lot, much higher than you would normally get on a song. So like you can work this metric out. You can see on Spotify for artists, you can see how many streams a song has had in a 28-day period. So let's just say it's 50,000. And then you can see how many saves that song has had. So let's say in that same period it's had 5,000 saves. That means your save rate is 10%. 5,000 saves on 50,000 listens.
Yeah.
Now that's just a high. That's extremely high.
Yeah, that sounds very high, doesn't it?
It's never that high.
That triggers the alarms.
Yes.
And Spotify is like, okay, we got a good one. Put it on the playlist.
Exactly. But like 1%, to 2% is really good. And at the moment, like Bad Decisions is sitting at around like 2.8%.
Fantastic.
So it's like way higher than average. So what Spotify is doing is when someone clicks on an I Prevail song and goes to radio, and then it cultivates a playlist based on I Prevail, they're putting Bad Decisions into that playlist because they know I Prevail and Red Hook are kind of similar genre-wise, and that people that listen to I Prevail also listen to Red Hook, and they'll like this song. So what's happening is Spotify is feeding this song to the algorithmic playlist. And so this is just an example of when you write a great song, and if it clicks with what the algorithms at Spotify are doing, it can be really powerful. So I do think that is changing the way people write songs. I think like big songs are getting shorter. I think
definitely.
I think
totally.
You know, it used to be like, okay, radio song 3 minutes 30. Now it's like a radio song is 3 minutes or under.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
You know, 3:30 is too long.
2:50.
Do you know, it's quite
long.
interesting. We're having this conversation in my place at the minute because usually in recording agreements, there's a definition of what qualifies as an album.
Yes.
And historically, the album has to last for so many minutes in duration, and usually it's so many tracks, so many different songs, and a certain duration. And you see in a lot of the major deals around like 45 minutes, sometimes even more. But these days, it's like I got a request in that the album was to be 20 minutes. And but then you actually look at that artist's history of putting out tracks. All their tracks are like 2 minutes 15, and so it doesn't actually sound that crazy an ask. It's a lot more impactful, I guess. Shorter songs, and I think we were talking over a beer one time about and it was almost a lot more of people starting with the chorus.
Big time.
Which is, and that struck me as, I guess it's just, like music's evolving, and, you got all sorts of things that like influence the shape of like, or the direction that's going in and songwriting. But it did strike me as something like, are we losing the art of songwriting? Because to me, like just like a good album, right? A good album should be like a journey, and there's highs and lows. And when you buy that album, maybe you bought it for one single that you liked, but then a month later you found out it was actually the second single that you really liked.
Sure.
6 months later, it's a track on the album that was never released as a single, and then a year later maybe it's different or whatever. So like I think as an album, you get that sort of like journey of the songwriter, if you like, if it's a band that are writing their own music. songs, surely, you know, there's got to be like a start, a finish. Like even like we were Bohemian Rhapsody.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It doesn't start off with the
exciting part.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So there's a journey and a build up. So
But,
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say is I think that your opinion on that is a reflection on your age, which is my age.
Yeah.
And our age. And is just based on what we've been through and what we experienced. So we think that that's what makes for a great album, because so many of the great albums we grew up had that. But I think that the next generation that's growing up listening to Lil Nas X and 2-minute songs where the lyrics might not hold the same weight as, you know, some of the artists we listen to, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I think that's just what they are growing up and are getting used to. And I honestly think that, you know, the way songs are changing, I think that's a good thing, because good songwriting is ever evolving. And it's ever a reflection on what's happening in society right now. So what's happening in society right now, you know, this is my opinion, is that, you know, we're all addicted to our phones. We're all jumping from one thing to the next. Our attention span is shrinking. I think that's a generally held view amongst most people.
Agreed.
So it's getting harder than ever to capture someone's attention. And so if you're writing a great song that is moving millions, maybe even billions of people around the world, you must be doing something very special when you're songwriting. So that, by my definition, makes you a great songwriter. So if that's busting out a hit song that's, you know, 1 minute and 55 seconds, like Old Town Road, I think was about that, Lil Nas X, and it's capturing something, and even the way you dress and the way you carry yourself, I think that is a genius artist. But I also think it's a reflection on the times, and the reference that I always think about when I think about this is when Quentin Tarantino came out into the movie scene, his first movie was Reservoir Dogs. And Reservoir Dogs, and I'm sure, I'm not a huge movie buff, so I'll just use this as an example. I'm sure he took a lot of inspiration from other movies he saw, but Reservoir Dogs starts with the end. So it starts with the bloodbath, and sorry to anyone that hasn't seen Reservoir Dogs.
30 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the end, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, it was so different that it was hailed as genius. And I think that's what's happening. And I wouldn't be surprised, you know, in a weird way, you can correlate that back to what's happening now. Is like we're giving everything up front to capture people's attention. But at the same time, I'm sure at some point people are going to get sick of that, and it's going to go the other way.
Yeah, it's like a pendulum.
It's going to be a pendulum.
Also, the Beatles had songs that were like 2 minutes.
Exactly. See, this is history repeating itself. No, absolutely right.
I mean,
like,
but they were
one
of the first huge pop stars that
and hooks
did the big
right at
pop.
the start. Like, you know, hooks delivered right at the beginning of every song to hook a person in, because that's what we're doing now.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, I can think there's like a lot of Beatles songs I can think of right away.
But
where,
not even
like,
just the Beatles. Like back then, you know, pop, you know,
Motown and stuff like
all of that.
Yeah.
There were
Smokey
short
Robinson,
songs delivered,
short songs.
lots of hooks right up front, incredible melodies. I think it meandered away over time. And then, I mean, if you look, you know, it's always like a reflection of what's come before. So, you know, I'm not a history buff, but like, let's say after the Beatles, you then had like rock music really came through, electrification,
70s, got a little more.
Led Zeppelin, all of that. That, like, you've gone from really short, tight songs. Even the Beatles themselves became really experimental. Then you went into Led Zeppelin.
Pink Floyd,
all that real craziness. And then what came after that? Disco, punk, short, sharp, you know. So I don't know. I think we could be in for it changing again, but I'm not upset about the fact that we live in this society where it's down to like 2 minutes 10 and you have to grab people's attention quickly.
I feel, as a producer, I feel that's the same way as you do. Like, music continuously evolves, you know, and then and for you to start and be relevant, you'll have to be mindful of those things to be able to adapt. Because I do music for a while. I've been doing music for a while, but I'm working now with artists that are way younger than me. They're doing stuff that is completely different to the stuff that I'm used to.
Yes.
And I'm having to adapt. I just gotta learn and like understand their craft and what they're trying to do, and maybe bring something from the experience, but also be kind of like open about it, you know? And
I think so. And what I tell like Faim and Red Hook is I say, guys, don't try write a hit song. You just don't take that approach. Like, yes, of course, we understand what's required for a great song, but experiment. And like, especially in the beginning of the process, I really try and encourage the guys to try things. You know, like that example of Red Hook, write the heaviest, song
Right.
you've ever done, or the lightest. It's about trying to do that. Because generally I find that the best songs come from experiments, and you can always pull a song back, but ultimately it's when you're trying things, you're experimenting, that the weird melody comes out because you're doing this really weird guitar drum thing that inspires the weird melody. And then you might end up building the whole song just around that weird melody. So I think as an artist, you also can't just be, relying on trying to write hit songs. You should be experimenting and challenging yourself and doing weird things. And it's different for every artist. But if that's where you want to go and you want to have songs that are big songs, you're going to need great melodies. You're going to need great lyrics. And it's going to have to be in a time frame that makes sense so that you can get played on radio and do well at streaming. So
I think that's super valuable. That's just very valuable insight.
I have a question. I'm very curious about a different topic, just not to shift, but I feel that there's not a lot of clarity, at least from my perspective, on the business side of the relationship with a manager when they're starting out. Because if you're starting out, obviously you're not making any money, or you're barely making any, right?
No, that's right. Nothing
but
for years.
But your perspective as a manager to get involved with someone is on the long term.
It's your only choice. It's your only choice to have that long term. I mean, I guess it's a little different. Look, the Faim was the first band I ever managed. And, I think I touched on it, but I was nervous about taking on a band because of the time commitment, but also just the commitment is like you're taking on the hopes and dreams of these individuals. And it's something really serious, like that as a manager, you have to take serious. Because I was once that young 21-year-old with these like incredibly driven dreams to become a successful musician. And I lost faith in that previous manager. And then I put all my faith in this next manager. Because you need their help. A manager needs to step up and be there for the band. So what was great about the Faim, and this would be advice for people that want to manage, is with your first act, find someone on your level. Find someone that's starting. When I started managing the Faim, they'd only played, when I discovered them, they'd never played a show. They were just a band rehearsing. So that's what I kind of love about the challenge as well, is like, here is a band that I heard at my rehearsal studio in 2015, and here we are in 2022, and they're going to be third band on the main stage at Rock am Ring, hopefully in front of 70,000 people, and it's going to be amazing. And awesome. They were the 24th most played song on French radio in 2021, and these are all things that are awesome because they've grown, but I've grown, and I've been able to learn the steps of the way. So I think it's, and then coming back to the business side of things, I started managing them properly in July 2016, and I took my first commission in July 2018, so 2 years later.
Wow.
And then I earned some commissions as we were going along and building up, but because we were constantly touring, we were always spending that money. So I couldn't pay myself the commissions, and I actually only caught up to the commissions I was owed 2 months ago.
Wow.
Do you feel like also as a manager, you pay part on the investment of the development, right? Like, by using
you have to.
resources.
I mean, it's different for all acts, but like, I lent the Faim, like 25 grand to get them their first ever flights over. Their parents also kicked in, It's a lot of faith, and you have to, and this is the thing, like, I only will really manage acts where I'm super involved and I'm in it, and that's not for everyone. Like, a lot of acts don't want that kind of manager, but that's just how I do it because I was a musician. And what I love is, like, the part of management I love is when a band sends me a new demo. That's the best part. When I get to listen to that demo for the very first time, knowing no one else has heard this, and I always will never do it like if I'm preoccupied with something. I'll do it in a way where I sit down, I put the headphones on, and I'll close my eyes, or I'll just sit there, or I'll think about it, and I'll listen to it really clearly that first time, and I'll think to myself, okay, is this special? Isn't it special? Is there anything that stands out? And I'll make a quick little note or two just from one listen, and then I'll give it a couple more, And that's the best part, because when it's really great, you're like, oh.
So speaking of the business end of being a manager, I was very curious because I've heard different philosophies about this. Do you have written agreements with the bands that you manage?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I did a 3-year management deal with the Faim, and then I did a 3-year management deal with Red Hook.
Yeah.
And honestly, I tried for 4, but they got me down to 3, which I felt was fine. But I'm big on the contract because I do think that, just as Danny was saying, it takes years. It's a long-term thing. And honestly, 3 years just isn't enough time.
No.
That's probably just enough to get started.
Just to get started.
That's
We're
up
to 6 years with, I've been managing Faim. And,
it's almost like a trial period.
It sort of is. Like a young band sees 3 years and they're like, oh my God, that's so long. Yeah. Whereas from what I've seen, it's really quick.
When I was working at a law firm and we were representing the artists a lot of the time, the head of that firm, when there was a management agreement or a request for a management agreement that came in the door, he'd purposely sit on it for as long as he could, basically, because the philosophy was that it's like dating initially. Yeah. They might get a few months into it, and then, he kind of wants them to get a few months in on both sides, just to see how this is going. And for his client, which a lot of the time would be the artist, he wants to be absolutely sure that this is a person that artist wants to work with, because more than anything, the artist manager relationship is such a close one, such a fundamental one. I don't think there is a closer one in the music industry other than potentially, your bandmates, let's say. But the manager's almost an extension of the band. They work so closely, and you have to. It's a personal thing. You have to be able to gel and figure that out. So I always find that was kind of like an insight into the process. Some of these lawyers will just purposely sort of drag their heels for as long as they can get away with, just to make sure that everything's good there.
So with Red Hook and the Faim, what I said to both those bands is, with the Faim, I said, look, I've never managed a band before, but I've been managed by a great manager, and I think I know what I'm going to do. And I think we kind of had already been working together roughly for a year, and but I said, I'll just do this for 6 months, and you can see if you want to work with me, and then I can see if I want to work with you. And so I only actually sent them the management contract after 6 months, and I did the same with Red Hook. So I started working with them in January 2019.
Had a dating period.
Yeah, but then it was another 6 months, because that's the other thing no one really talks about. Managers want to work with awesome people. I want to work with someone super talented, really driven. But I've met super talented, really driven, but just not that likable. Not the sort of person I could really hang out with. The guys and girl in Red Hook and the Faim, they're buddies, they're friends. We care about each other. We can talk. If they've got problems, they call me, we chat about it. It's a friendship as well.
Yeah, that's great.
I like that.
It's like family.
It is, and I like it. And that's partly why I can't do too many, because even 2, I feel like, is a lot. And I'm really fortunate as a manager that I don't rely on management income as my main source of income. My main source of income is my rehearsal studios.
Yes.
And management is, secondary to that.
It gives you freedom. It gives you flexibility. Me freedom,
and it doesn't make me need to make decisions that might not be in the best long-term interest of the band. So Red Hook could have done a publishing deal by now to get a 20 or 30 grand advance, but we didn't do that. We could have signed a crappy deal as well to get some money, but we didn't do that. We're still 100% independent. The band's generating, they're up to 250,000 monthly listeners. So they're generating good amount of streams, which is now generating good monthly income. And it's great. And we're totally independent, and it's lovely.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Again, just the differences between Red Hook and the Faim as 2 bands, one being signed, one not currently being signed, and for this part, at this stage, choosing not to accept a deal. I think a lot of people might think that, the sole goal is get a record deal at all costs, but Red Hook are proving that that is not the case, and don't just accept any old deal. Build your thing, get good at doing everything yourself, or work with the right people, in this case, like a good manager, and just growing it, and like know your worth and know your value, and wait to partner with the right partner, be it a label that you're going to sign to, etc. But have patience, and know that signing a record deal is not necessarily the be all and end all for you.
Yeah, and I mean, you're speaking to someone that was on 2 different major labels with Gyroscope, Warner's and Universal, did 4 albums all on major labels. The Faim have now just about to drop their second BMG major indie label. And so I come from that world, and I'm positive about it because it was a good experience for me. But seeing what Red Hook's doing now is really kind of shifting my opinion around. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if I had a playbook for a young band just starting out, this is what I would do. I would work really hard on that first batch of 10 songs, because this is another thing I don't think people think about. But I think now, I think in the old days, you would write and you would release songs and you would have a couple of albums and you would build. And I think that still happens. Like with my band, that happened, first album 46 in the charts, second album 20, third album 1, fourth album 3, and it sort of built over time. Whereas I think bands have a big opportunity to capture a lot of attention right at the start of their career now. And that's because music travels so quickly because everyone can share it. So if you can write a song, and maybe it's the first song you release that's left of center, different, speaks, but still has a place in the world of your genre and style, I think there's a big opportunity for you. And I would have 5 to 6 songs that you think are really great, stand out, ready to go. And I would drop each song every 6 weeks. That's the other thing. I think dropping songs once every 3 months doesn't really have the same weight that it used to. I would be dropping a song every 6 weeks, and then I'd be really focused on standing out and being different. Because I think that's the other thing. You gotta try stand out and be different to really get noticed at the beginning, and doing it independently. It's not all bad. It's actually pretty damn cool. Because if you can get those Spotify streams up there, you're only going to become more attractive to the labels. You're going to end up with a better deal. I mean, I'm sure you see this where someone walks through the door and they've got 1 million monthly listeners versus the band that, is just starting out. Yeah,
totally. Everyone's going to look more closely at that first band, and, because they've, quite honestly, we talked about this before. They've put that sweat equity in.
Yeah.
And, there's 1 million people there per month who are actually plugged in, and telling the label that, there's something going on here, for sure.
And I think it's going to go that way. I think there's going to be more of that, where bands purposefully, they'll want to sign to a major, but they'll be like, well, we're not going to sign until we get up to 500,000 monthly listeners before we even start talking, because they'll know they'll get a better deal that way.
Amazing. Rob, I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for making the trek all the way out to Brooklyn.
Sure, buddy.
I think this is a super valuable episode, and we at the Record Shepherds, really thank you for offering your insight with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been
very exciting to have you here, Rob.
Yeah.
Great to have you. So Tim, remind the listeners where they can tune in to hear us.
You can listen to the Record Shepherds anywhere where podcasts are played. You can also watch us on YouTube, and definitely email us at therecordshepherds@gmail.com if you have any questions or concerns, anything we could be doing better. And as always, in the descriptions, I'll be posting resources when it comes to finding good managers. We'll be posting, resources to Rob and, your career and all that good stuff. So, thank you for listening.
And until the next exciting episode, continue to follow the guidance of the Record Shepherds.
Don't be the sheep.
Be the goat.
Thank you, guys.